For Boom. All right. Hello, everybody. Very happy new year to one and all. And welcome to another bumper episode, episode 4 of Betrayed by Dice, the tabletop wargaming podcast that's already broken all of its resolutions. My name's Lee Burns, and joining me here again at Betrayed by Dice headquarters is the man himself, Daryl T. Stoker. Daryl, how's things? I think it's still just about okay to ask, did you have a good Christmas?
Yeah.
How was the festive break?
Yeah, it was very good, thank you. And I actually had a break as well, which was quite nice. Took the week off. I normally work over Christmas because I work in healthcare. But got the week off this time. Was really good. Nice, chilled Christmas, very quiet one. Yeah, spent it with my family. Nice, quiet affair. How about you?
Yeah, great. Got 2 young kids, so they got a ton of stuff. And we got to play. They're old enough now that some of their toys are kind of interesting to me, which is great because I got very little. But it's all about kids, isn't it? You've got a young daughter,
4-year-old,
spoiled horribly, or not too bad?
Yeah. Well, so so her birthday's on the 10th of December. So we kind of try and split the one big celebration that's split into 2 smaller chunks. We're also, I don't know, it sounds a little bit hippy-dippy, doesn't it? But we try not to put too much weight on like volume of presents and stuff, and just being more about the day and the family side of things. But she's still got plenty. Yeah, sounds
like that makes sense. So yeah, we're coming at you as ever on multiple platforms.
Indeed.
So both on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for Betrayed by Dice, or on YouTube at youtube.com/Northern Realms. Where you can see us occasionally acknowledge the camera and share lovely pictures of some of what we're talking about as well.
Indeed, yes.
We also, on that note, have an Instagram account where we post stuff we'll be talking about and other things that we're up to. That's instagram.com/Betrayed by Dice.
It does.
You can always also email us at betrayedbydice@gmail.com. It'd be kind of cool if anyone did that wasn't spam. That hasn't yet.
Just an email,
just
anything.
Feel free.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's the admin tick. So onwards to the matter at hand, and that's today's show, Daryl. So what have we got coming up?
So in standard Betrayed by Dice format, we have got hobby progress and plans first, and then we'll talk about some recent games.
Sounds good. We're going to be doing a quick check-in on everybody's favourite hobby company.
Yeah,
that would be Games Workshop in good GW, bad GW, where I think we're both probably talking a little bit about the Old World releases.
Indeed, yeah. I think we're both sort of personally and nostalgically invested in it, aren't we? So
that's definitely true. Okay, cool.
We've got a pretty weighty main topic this episode as well, haven't we? So we're talking about the real world setting in war games, and some of the moral and sort of sensitive decisions around those settings and that style of system, and the application of, including some of the sort of media, not sensationalism, but what's the word? Controversy around it from the middle of last year.
Yeah. That's right. There's a couple of sort of things which caused a big fuss within the sort of gaming community, but I think we want to cause not a big fuss, but just to take a bit of a balanced view of like look at the kind of games that we might be interested in, and to understand what it is that like interests us in those games, and like what games we're okay with playing and maybe not, and why that would be.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's it's coming out of a conversation we've had previously, so it's nice to take the time to sort of like flesh that out a bit more.
Indeed, yeah, absolutely.
Cool. And then, as is a custom, we'll finish with secondary objectives, where we each pick out something somewhat tabletop adjacent or not tabletop related at all that we want to talk about.
Yeah,
and that's going to do it.
Yeah.
All right, fabulous. So hobby progress and plans. Who wants to go with what they've been doing over the last month and a bit?
Why don't you go first?
All right, well, it's been fairly prolific.
Your output's been impressive
for me. So, like, to the extent to that being the case, that I had to actually sort of like, decide what I was going to talk about here. So, there's some stuff going to be left on the cutting room floor. But a lot of what I've done, particularly sort of like leading up to Christmas and over the festive period, was Secret Santa related. So,
it was, yeah.
Our Wargaming Club, West Allotment Wildlands, a Secret Santa was arranged. It was pretty open. People could do whatever they want, give whatever they want.
Whatever they were comfortable with.
Yeah, whether it was painting something up or buying something or whatever. So I think I can probably like give away spoilers now. So I decided to paint up Janice Drake from Blackstone Fortress.
Yeah.
For Stephen from the club. That's a really cool miniature.
Very cool.
It was effectively an invitation to play Blackstone Fortress at some point in the future as a miniature.
That's a pretty cool invitation.
I hope so. Yeah. But yeah, that was a really fun one to paint up. So I kind of felt befitting as it was a gift to sort of like give it my best effort. So, painting the face in the sort of like, not just with contrast paints, but with like, layers and stuff. And also doing probably the one sort of like fancy technique thing, which I feel like I can do with some success, which is power swords.
Yeah, it was great. It was really good. Yeah.
Using glazes in the sort of like, I don't know, kind of traditional GW way of like
the heavy metal style power sword.
Yeah, exactly. So like having like a dark area, light area, lots of glazes to blend it in. So yeah, that went pretty well. And I found on Etsy a little like sort of perspex like coffin, really, a little like sort of case for it, and then magnetized
almost
that.
Looks like a little stasis chamber or something, doesn't it?
Yeah. So I mean, hopefully that went down well. And then on the other side of Christmas, because my Secret Santa that I received, which was something which was amazingly cool, was the City Walls set from Cromarty Forge.
That's correct, yeah.
So this is for Warmaster. This is from Dan from the club, so massive thanks to Dan.
Yeah.
Amazing gift, and also thanks to yourself as well, Daryl, because I think Dan had commissioned you to actually get the thing printed out.
That's correct, yeah.
So, yeah, if anyone can imagine the old Warhammer Fantasy Mighty Fortress set, of like lots of sections of wall and lots of towers, but all sort of join up together. Exactly that.
The Warhammer Siege like centerpiece, yeah.
Exactly that, but in like 10mm scale.
Yeah.
So yeah, I managed to get that painted up and ready to go, and really looking forward to like throwing that onto the tables for Warmaster.
I found some files for the old Siege, like the ladders and the towers and what else is there? Ladders and towers.
Those battering rams and
battering ram. That was it. Yeah.
That'd be amazing.
I found the files for that as well. Yeah,
well, that's very cool. This is like I think I really enjoy painting terrain because you can decide after you've done the first bit what your process is going to be, and the process here was spray black, lots of greys, dry brushing, an oil wash at some point after all of that, another dry brush, and then just sponging on some browns and greens just to break it up a bit. To give it some interest, but not spend ages on it. And also, just as well, picking out individual bricks in like a lighter grey to sort of like give it some interest.
And I think it's worth remembering that this is a 10mm scale castle. So even though it's fairly big on the table, isn't it? Like when you put it all together, the bricks themselves are tiny.
They are pretty small. They are pretty small. Yep.
Yeah. So, but it looked really, really cool. I'm looking forward to seeing it on the table.
Cheers.
And you've used it already as like parts for terrain and things, haven't you?
We've used parts of it in a couple of games that we'll get to. Just to break up just to put some towers on the. There was one mission which had a tower, as a sort of central objective. Yeah. So we used
That's
it for
an old Fantasy Battles mission, isn't it?
That was the one in 8th edition that I think everybody avoided because it was kind of unplayable.
Yeah, if you got someone in like garrisoned in it, they were just like invincible.
The Watchtower, I think from 8th edition. But anyway, it's fun to paint terrain because once you've got your technique down, it's kind of mindless, and you can just sort of like, but you still feel like you're cranking it out and like making progress.
And you get like that feeling of achievement at the end, don't you, when you see it all together? Yeah,
definitely. So
I'm looking forward to doing that with the the Masters of the Universe stuff, because you get a load of like Underworld style walls and things.
Oh,
like that,
fantastic. Very cool. Still on the Warmaster tip, I painted up the first unit fully of the Warmaster army that again you'd printed out for us, which was a steam tank, which was just so cool. Like, I've always wanted a steam tank in fantasy, never kind of got round to it because I never sort of committed to doing an Empire army. I now have two. They might be tiny, but
you've got two steam tanks.
I've got two steam tanks, so I don't care. And it was just loads of fun to paint up, just some metallics and not oil washes. I think I just used like known oil. And just came out fine, looking pretty cool. And in doing that, I think I figured out like what I'm doing for my basing for the Warmaster army, which is effectively some Vallejo texture paste. Because it's sort of thin enough that you can dot it in amongst
and it's like
little guys.
The grit in it's very fine as well, isn't it? So
exactly.
Because I made the mistake of trying some like normal sort of basin sand on some like some trial stands, and the scale of it is, it's like every grain of sand's like the size of someone's shin
or something.
So it just doesn't really work, whereas this stuff's so fine, the whatever the aggregate is in it, it's so fine that it's like it's still relevant to the scale, isn't it?
It doesn't look daft. I don't know what they use. It's not sand. It's not sand, though. It's something finer than that. But so that stuff's gone on fine, and then just a wash and a dry brush on that, and then.
Which colour did you use out? Because I bought the Dark Earth, but it's like almost grey. It was meant to be like a dark brown, but it looks almost grey.
Dark Earth, and it is. Yeah, I know what you mean. It's got like a greyish mud kind of look to it. So I'm using that Agrax Earth Shades and a bit of Xandri Dust and Bleached Bone on top.
Brilliant.
And then, but the key to sort of like, because so far so brown, and I think the key...
Did you say Bleached Bone?
Bleached Bone. Or whatever, the Screaming Skull or whatever, I do have some Bleached Bone.
Just everyone crack out your pots of Bleached Bone, which everyone definitely has not got.
I
was like, Bleached Bone, what's that? Yeah. So it's
Ushabti Bone will do just as well.
And Screaming Skull are the new triad.
But anything that's lighter than Xandri Dust, just as a sort of final highlight. But then the key to it is some 2mm tufts from Gamer's Grass.
Gamer's Grass,
because I think you need something on there that is A, tiny, and B, grassy. Because otherwise it just all looks very brown and very a bit indistinct. And so I was thinking about like doing some flock, but even like the sort of flock that I've got would be, well, it would look like they were up to their knees in some sort of. So these tufts, they're absolutely tiny. You will need some tweezers or something.
Is this the first time you've used Gamer's Grass tufts?
No, I've used Gamer's Grass tufts before. They're great.
They're very good. They're a little bit more expensive, but I think it's one of those things where the difference in quality is worth paying for. Like the fact that even at the smaller scale, they've got like varying heights in the length of the bits of grass and thing is just crazy, man.
Yeah, they're very good, and there's a variety of them. So at 2mm scale, there was like 4 or 5 that I could have got. So I got 2, and that's just given a little bit of variety on the bases as well. So that came out good, which is sort of settled the deal for how I'm going to do the basing for the rest of the army, which is, it's a way off. It's good to know these things. So far, so Warmaster, but elsewhere, I also finished painting up some Frostgrave female folks and soldiers, and that was just a real fun job of just for each one picking quite a bright contrast color and using that for like most of it, and then just filling in the rest with sort of
skins and browns
and leathers and things like that. So they're unusually bright. I don't usually paint bright things, and for the last one, I've bought some speed paint. I'm not going to remember the name of the pink, but a very bright pink. It might be baby pink or something like that. It's very, very bright. And there's going to be some sort of story about why my second in command wizard has got a very, very pink robe. And the wizard doesn't approve, and it's a source of creative tension in the team. So looking forward to that. But they were a load of fun. And again, quite quick to do. So that happened over Christmas. And then in terms of plans going forward, I mean, having a bit of time off work, it doesn't half allow you to think about all the things that you want to paint.
It does, yeah.
But I fired up the spreadsheet from last year. I found out that I painted on the nose 100 miniatures last year, which for
nice.
me is a lot. And there's definitely something about having like going to a gaming club and having regular games. Definitely, that's the thing that like is motivating us to paint when I do. But yeah, there's all sorts of plans for the next year. So like a Warmaster army to finish, or to start and to finish.
And then maybe a second one.
Maybe a second one. We'll see. I do like the high elves, like, absolutely amazing. I've got Blackstone Fortress to get painted because there's some talk about starting up a Blackstone Fortress campaign.
Indeed, yeah. There's quite a few sort of mutterings of starting those campaign style games in the club, isn't there? Which will be cool to have some of those like longer running instead of just one-offs.
Yeah, absolutely. When that works, when people come back and it works out and it sort of like hangs together, it's fantastic. When to get a sort of campaign like that going. And then I did get a modest GW voucher in my stocking over Christmas, and I got, because it's so hard to get GW stuff, or it disappears so quickly. So I bought straight away the Galapox Infected, which is a really out there kill team.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? Yeah.
The models are amazing. I'm looking forward to giving them time just to paint. And myself and my friend Jamie, and also a couple of us are planning on going to Warhammer World. Josh as well, planning on going to Warhammer World, not till September next year.
This year.
This year now.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, this year. And so so that's a longer term plan. I want to have maybe debut them at Warhammer World. That'd be kind of cool. We'll see.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's me. Like I say, that's feels like quite a lot.
You have done a lot, yeah. No, kudos.
Yeah, cheers. But what have you been up to, Daryl? What's been getting painted?
So much less than you. Unfortunately, this sort of past month or so has been the end of my second year of my masters and a lot of portfolio work to do, so I've been sort of pretty studious, but I have made a start on my Warmaster Dark Elves, painted the unit SPM, and I think this is the third time I've painted this exact unit. Yeah, so I've went through 3 iterations of them now, but I'm stuck on one now, so I'm happy with that.
Is that a case of just getting the scheme sorted, or
and which paints I wanted to use, and I sort of flip-flopped on the silver a little bit because I really want to have a dark metal look, and I know that in small scales it can get a bit washed out, but I've just decided to commit to the bit and just go for it, and just use some appropriate and maybe punchy highlights to make tips of spears look good and things like that. But I do want it to be a pretty dark looking army as far as the aesthetic goes, so yeah, I'm happy with that.
I think that the weight of numbers, once there's enough of them looking the same, all regimental and whatever, I think almost any color scheme will look great.
Good, yeah.
And I also think that there's other ways, whether it's a basing or whether it's like picking out the odd highlight where you can get that sort of like pop and contrast.
Yeah, visual. Yeah, totally. Cool. I managed to achieve my goal of getting my bust printed. So I've printed my Reconnect bust. I've also printed. I'm trying not to talk too loudly because you can hear next door, but. So Lilith from Diablo 4. My fiance is a massive gamer and she adores Diablo. So I've printed off a Lilith bust and I'm going to paint that for her. It's a little ornament to hang on her wall. So that'll be cool.
So how was the process of printing stuff off at that sort of larger scale? More so than you'd done? Was there anything that was tricky or any learning out of that, or was it just
same? I got a new printer just before Christmas, which your castle was actually the first thing to be printed on.
Oh, cool.
And it's a very good printer in terms of it has a lot of quality of life things that make printing bigger things or slightly more challenging things easier. It's got a heated vat, so temperature changes don't cause inadequate curing and things like that. And it's just a joy to use. So to be honest with you, it's been fine. It's been absolutely fine. So yeah, I'm looking forward to giving them a bit of a shot. So as of this evening, so after we've finished recording this, I've got a few more things to get submitted, and then I am portfolio free for the rest of my career, which is good. Well, not necessarily career, but the rest of this course, anyways.
Okay.
So much more hobby time on my hands. I've also printed out a army, so there's a few of us in the club that have got some armies for Full Spectrum Dominance, which is a pretty cool 6mm sci-fi, quite low weight in terms of rules and things like that, but just nice models, quite fun, easy roller, plays on a 2x3, so, kitchen table size game.
So combined arms on a small table.
It is indeed, yes, yeah. So it's a combined arms skirmish game with. I'll show you the infantry. 6mm scale infantry is, well, it's nearly half the size of a Warmaster.
Well, I did want to ask. So you weren't satisfied with the smallness of Warmaster. You've had to downgrade. Yeah. Downscale even further.
Yeah.
Is that it in wargaming? Do we go any lower?
There is 3. Yeah, I think there's a 3mm scale as well.
Right.
Yeah.
What is that? Just
it's literally just like lumps on a base.
Okay.
Yeah. But that's. I've had my eye on this for a year now because I've seen a year ago. I saw that it was on Beasts of War or whatever their name is.
Northern Irish fellas, yeah.
Yeah. And they were interviewing Giacomo, who's one of the creators of the game and one of the sculptors. And they played like a game and then talked about it. And they've got really cool models and blah, blah, blah. And then I saw that they had a tribes thing, which is the My Mini Factory version of Kickstarter.
Yeah.
And it's weird because as soon as you back it, you get the reward, so you don't have to wait for it to be released.
Okay.
So I saw there was a tribes on for that. So there's 2 new factions were getting released. And if you bought them, then you got a hefty discount on the old factions as well. So I just thought, sod it. I've been wanting it for a while, and it was my sort of Christmas present to myself. Well, not myself. I got a bit of money off my mum and dad for Christmas, so did that. And you can see over on my desk there, there's some cool like oil factories and refineries and stuff like that. And the terrain, it'll blow your mind when you have a look at it up close. But like the guy is an evil genius. The stuff that he's sculpted that works at such a small scale on a printer is bizarre.
Well, I was going to say, so a new scale opens up new worlds of terrain, and the game is like there's terrain that's just been sculpted specifically for the game by the same guy.
Yep, it's all part of the same tribes thing. So
wow, cool.
He's got a few sets. He's got the favelas, which is just obviously like habitable buildings. There's a research center, which is more sciencey sort of buildings and like antennas and dishes and things like that. And then this one that he's came out with this time as part of this tribes is the oil refineries. So there's big gas tanks and big cylindrical gas tanks and like spherical oil, whatever they are, reservoirs and things. Just really cool. And then like the big pylons that I'm going to try and get some smoke and stuff on. It looks cool.
It looks amazing. Is your plan with this stuff to to treat it as because it is so detailed, to treat it in sort of a terrain way of like washes and dry brushing, or are you tempted to pick out details and things?
I'll maybe just do the odd little bit, but it's so small that nobody would. So on the Discord, so they've got a Discord for the game, and on the Discord somebody had printed out a load of buildings, and then like you went, I've printed however many of these buildings now, and I've just realised that you're an absolute sadist because I looked through the doorway and there's like an open garage on one. It's like you've sculpted shelves with things on inside the garage. Like, what's wrong with you? This is way too small to be doing that.
That's amazing.
But I think a lot of it's going to be some rustiness and some dry brushes and some pops of colour. But there's a really cool sort of Gene Stealer culty looking industrial Mad Max faction that's got quad bikes and jeeps and like land crawlers and things. So it'll go well with that.
Full spectrum dominance.
Full spectrum dominance.
That's the game.
Yeah.
Sounds very cool.
Yeah, and it just very dice light, and it's a pretty interesting system. And you roll dice equal to there's a value that you have to work out at the beginning of your turn, how many units you've got, whatever, and those dice are used to carry out actions on your different units when you activate them, and certain, so like one might have a missile launcher. It might be a unit of infantry that's got one anti-tank weapon, and you can only use a 6 to do that.
Okay.
But it's not a game where you just want all 6s, because then some things might have, for instance, like there's like a futuristic techie sort of faction, and the 1s and 2s they can use like a jump pack, like a jetpack, to do some extra movement. So it's good to have like a spread, and then you can do a little bit of like putting a dice on a card to then like hold that activation for later, almost like Overwatch and things.
Okay, so it's a dice pool, but dice do different things with different units.
And you have to use dice to do activations. You can't do anything without a dice. So there's a load of generic actions, like move, which you can I think you can use any dice for, but you still have to spend one of your dice from your pool. So it stops you from being able to just, take 100 of the cheapest things and spam. But yeah, so there's that. And was there anything else? Nope. So just plans. I've got Alex's Moonstone stuff to finish, and he's coming back up to Newcastle for the Conquest tournament I'm running in February. I definitely want to get at least 1,000 points of Warmaster painted in the next sort of 3 or 4 weeks. That's going to be my plan. Now that I don't have to stress about my spare time, and my shift pattern's changing because I'm moving hospitals, I'm going to have a day where I can do a bit of stuff for myself. So 100% going to have at least 1,000 points done. That'd
be going some. But I'm sort of, I blatantly painted the steam tank first because I thought it was cool, and also because I don't want to know how long it's going to take me to do these endless quantities of halberdiers. Or, I mean, I do, and I'll get to it. But I just think it's going to take me ages.
Yeah.
We'll see.
I think my scheme is relatively low difficulty. There's a lot of uniformity. It's a lot of metal and a lot of purple.
Yeah.
So it's not difficult to do. I think I could do 6 stands. 6 strips in a night.
Yeah. Okay.
Fairly comfortably.
That'd be going good.
So I've only got 4 units of spearmen, 2 units of crossbows in my whole army, and then my plan was do a unit of spearmen and then a character to like palette cleanse.
Makes sense.
Unit of spearmen, a hydra, unit of spearmen, something like that. Just
treat yourself to a hydra.
Exactly,
after a unit of spearmen.
After a difficult day of spearmen, have a nice relaxing hydra.
Sounds good.
Yeah. And then I've got 2 OG Battletech models that I promised a gent from the club called Richard. I mean, these things are probably 30 plus years old, and I've probably mentioned them on previous episodes, but I've got the biostrip there out ready to use on them, so I'm going to strip them off and get them painted up for them.
Cool. Good old biostrip. That's the stuff to use.
I've heard.
If you're stripping. Have you not given it a go before? All right.
No.
Yep.
Easy
really
enough to use.
Really good. Yeah. Well, in my I was going to say limited. I've used it a fair amount. Like I've bought one big pot of it, and it's looking pretty manky these days because it's been used and reused a few times.
Do you just drop the models in?
A lot of the time, if they're not delicate and bits aren't small parts that are not going to just fall off them, then just drop them in.
All right, okay. Well, these are solid.
Drop them in upside down, and then pull them out like an hour or 2 later, even, or a day or 2 if it's metal and you're not bothered about it and it's not like super detailed. And then the paint will either sluice off, or if it's been some like old hardcore paint that somebody's put on, a bit of a toothbrush. But it's really good stuff.
And then do you need to rinse it off under the tap or anything?
You do need to rinse it off under the tap.
Yeah.
It's less toxic than other sort of solutions that are available. I think probably still using gloves would be a good idea. But just wash it off under the tap. And wash the miniature in a good amount of water afterwards, because the biostrip, it's got this really gloopy texture that will get into all the sort of crevices. So I just put them in like a box, like a Tupperware of water, give them a day, and then like another wash, and then you're good to go. Nice. But it's great stuff. And prior to that, I was using some sort of alcohol based thing for stripping. I can't remember what it was. and it would stink and not do an amazing job.
Yeah.
Whereas this doesn't smell too bad and does a great job.
Cool.
So,
Well, I look forward to trying it.
Good luck with your biostrip.
Thank you.
All right. Hobby progress. Tick.
Done.
Shall we go into recent games?
Yeah, sounds good.
Do you want to chat about some recent games, or shall I pick it up? What do you want to do?
Well, I've just finished doing my progress, haven't I? So why don't you do your recent games and I'll do mine.
Perfect. All right. So there's been a fair amount of gaming to talk about because it probably is about a month and a half since we recorded. So the first of these is going back a while.
Yeah.
But I did want to talk about it because I just found it a really interesting game, a really interesting system for a couple of reasons. And so that was Star Wars Shatterpoint.
Yeah, fantastic game.
And it shares something with Warmaster, actually, which I'll get to when I'm talking about some Warmaster games in a second. But like, people talk about sort of lethality in games, and both Shatterpoint and Warmaster, there's a lot of things happen which don't kill anything.
Yeah.
Like, particularly, so the thing that struck me in Shatterpoint was how hard it was to actually kill anyone. You would sort of like degrade them or like push them around a bit, but it really seemed it's such an objective focused game that what you were doing by, you know, slapping somebody in the face or like whacking them with a lightsaber or whatever was much more about pushing them back,
driving them back,
and then you following forward to get onto an objective or to get close to somebody else that you need to be close to. So is it Atomic Mass Games?
Atomic Mass Games, yeah.
And it's the same people that have done Marvel Crisis Protocol, and I've heard people say that it has some similarities with that game.
There's definitely some pretty strong similarities, but they're definitely different games. The rule system's different, the way scoring works is different. So yeah, it's definitely different.
Cool. So I'm not like a massive Star Wars guy by any stretch. Like, you know, I've seen the films, but I'm not like deep into the lore or anything like that.
Yeah.
So for me, I was just approaching it from the point of view of like the game and the system.
I'm going to play a new game, yeah.
But it was great, and as well as the sort of the movement shenanigans, which seemed to be kind of the core engine of the thing, getting on the objectives and what have you, rather than killing people. I also really like the movement rulers. So they've got this sort of like this angled ruler.
Yep.
This 2-part angled ruler. So you're moving this much this way and this much this way. But whereas with most,
anywhere in between.
But with most games, you always, you know, you measure with a tape measure, front to base or back to back. With this, you are effectively measuring from the back to the front because you place the model.
The front to the back.
Yeah. So the ruler fits onto the front of the base, and then the model fits onto the front. The front of a ruler.
Yeah,
I'm probably describing this quite poorly. Like if you Google the rulers, you'll see what I'm talking about. But it just not that like movement in a game, I guess, which is so movement focused. It was just really cool to have it be really clear where your model moves to, and not like, you know, have any sort of like movement thing hovering over the board. Not that, you know, there's anything wrong with that, but, and, you know, and we live in a world of trust, but it's still just kind of cool, but it was super obvious where the model was going.
One of the things that I think I really like about it is it gives you a lot of freedom, but it also restricts the way that movement works. Whereas in something like, you know, insert name of game here, you know, I've got 6 inches of movement, so I'm going to go 2 this way, then round this corner for 2, and then, or you know, like in any combination of, you can't do that because your ruler doesn't bend that way. So I can get to anywhere where this ruler can essentially fit, and anywhere along that track of that right angle or whichever angle you've bent it to, I can sort of jump off like a rail almost. I can jump off it and sort of take up station there. But yeah, it's really, you're right, the game is won and lost on movement and being able to control space, and it's really cool.
Absolutely. So massive thanks to Scott and Paul from the club who are walking us through that. Again, you're exactly right with what you're saying. There's the clarity that you had around where things could move, and I can imagine that appealing to, or being easy to understand for anyone coming from not from a wargaming background, but from board games or whatever. It's like, this is where this guy's going to move. It's really clear. And then there was other rulers and sort of measurement gauges for whether you were close enough to do certain things. So it was all on these.
You can shoot range 4, exactly. Yeah.
All proprietary sort of measuring gauges. So yeah, really good. And yeah, really fun game. I don't think I'm going to get. I'm not going for it. I'm not getting deep into it, but it was really interesting to see the system. Really appreciated the game.
Is it a game that you would play again if you had the opportunity?
Defo. Yeah, defo for like. Yeah, it was fun to do. It didn't take all night.
Yeah,
the terrain looked kind of cool. It's the right size of board.
The scoring's pretty cool as well, isn't it? The struggle, so it's like a tug of war.
Yeah, that's something that needs you could talk about a little bit. There's basically a tracker, and when you do things, it pushes it in one direction. When they do, your opponent does things, it pushes the other way. But then there's a kind of like Mario Kart when you're at the back of the pack, equalizing kind of thing.
A comeback mechanic where your track gets shorter.
Yeah,
the distance that you need to achieve on your track gets shorter.
Yeah, so if you're getting annihilated early on, all of a sudden, if you can go on a run, then things can even out. So yeah, really interesting, something quite different from what I was used to.
Cool game.
Then elsewhere, I have managed, with big thanks to Drew from the club, who's sort of been helping with sort of like knowing the rules quite well and things like that. A couple of games of Warmaster, which, given that we've kind of committed to it to some extent with like new armies and a new game, it was really not a relief, but it was really great to see that having played it a couple of times, it was definitely a system I was going to really enjoy. The command phase or its movement works by command, so you might get to move your stuff depending on whether you manage to roll lower than your various HQ guys sort of leadership characteristic. That works really well. It's got this level of unpredictability to it, which I really like, and it just has the feel of a rank and flank game. So you've got lots of units on the table. It looks really cool, especially when you get some relatively correctly sized terrain going on. But it doesn't have all of the things which used to kind of do my head in about, or some rank and flank games where it's really important how you're wheeling and what you in Warmaster. Effectively, if you've got the movement, you can just move the unit, which is quite freeing. It's sort of like there's loads of tactics which I was getting nowhere near about flanking and about like following in charges. And there's a lot of depth to it.
It's much more about the macro tactics than it is the minutiae of how many degrees each unit wheels and things, isn't it?
So that was just great, really. It looks fantastic. So the thing I was talking about with it not being overly lethal, I mean, once things get into combat, it is. But in shooting and in magic, so far in the games that we've played, it really isn't. So like those are both. I mean, magic hasn't done anything yet. I need to figure out how that works. But like
taking loads of mages. I think the Tomb Kings have got some fairly potent magic.
Okay.
And I think from what I've seen from YouTube videos and things, quite a common build, because as a force they're not really that strong. They rely quite heavily on their magic. Running 4 mages or lich priests is not uncommon, and just blasting spells all day long.
Interesting. So I've got like, with my Empire army, a Grand Theogenist, I think it is, on this big chariot thing, and he's done nothing yet. So we'll need to figure out how to get more out of him. But shooting, so I've got cannons and what they're called, the sort of fast repeating artillery. Hellblaster, there we go. They don't kill much. That might partly be because I was playing Drew, and he's got Chaos Dwarves, and they've got 4 wounds per stand, so they're quite hardy. But what they do is they push back and they disrupt, and they sort of prevent your opponent from sort of like attacking en masse in the way that they want. So it's usually you want your guys to like kill the other guys, but it's nice when a system sort of allows for more nuance than just, oh, well done, you've blasted them off the board.
People. That's reassuring to know, because I've just printed off an army for Carl, and there is a shocking number of archers in it. Wood elves, and I think there's 6 or 8 units of archers. So yeah.
Well, we'll see. I mean, I don't know how many dice those guys get to roll, so we'll see.
Well, I know they hit on 3s because they're elves. They're better at shooting. So
all right, interesting. All right, we'll look forward to facing them. And just elsewhere, a couple of other quick bits of gaming been going on. So I played the first sort of Escape the Gallowfall mission for Kill Team, which was using drop pods, little baby drop pods that I painted a little while ago. The only thing to say about that was that it's just reminded us how much I think I like it when the objectives in a game are terrain and not like tokens littering the place up.
Yeah.
Kill Team's pretty token heavy as a sort of system goes. You know, like whether you're
Concealed
ready, concealed, or whatever. There's quite a lot of tokens going on. If you get injured, there's a token. If you pick something up, there's a token.
Yeah,
there's quite a lot of tokens. So for the objectives to not be tokens, that was cool. And elsewhere, I've been playing quite a lot of Warhammer Underworlds.
Yeah.
So I had a game on early in the day on New Year's Eve. A couple of games with Josh. Very silly games where like almost nothing happened, but like nobody died, but like lots of points were scored.
Points, big prizes.
Underworlds can be quite swingy like that.
Yeah, it can.
There's only 3 turns, so sometimes not a lot will happen, or sometimes a lot will happen very quickly.
And there's only 4 activations per turn, right?
Yeah, and that's not... Yeah, so that's your pool of activations for all of your guys, however many you've got.
So some factions have 3 models, some factions have 6, 7 models, whatever.
Yes, I've got some Nighthaunt who've got 8 models. So yeah, seven models.
But you're only ever going to activate 4 at most.
That's
and
right.
you can use those tokens multiple times on one person, can't you?
That's
so
right.
You can make an attack and then you can do charges, but you can only move once.
Yep. You can move twice nowadays. They changed it so you can move twice if you haven't charged.
Oh yeah,
so,
sorry, that's what I mean. Yeah, so once you've charged, you can't do it, but you can attack again, can't you? Yeah.
That's right. And then some more Underworlds recently at the club. Had a 4-player game. And
how did that go? Like, I'm a little bit of I can get a bit frustrated with big multiplayer games where it's a competitive thing, but
I mean, I'm great. I think great.
Good.
So we played it in a very casual way. I think we were all just using the decks that came with the warbands that they came with, without any sort of like deck building or sort of min-maxing or anything like that. And I mean, I'm saying great. Like, I know Joe, who was there, like he sort of like threw some like little gribbly guys that he had up against Mollog Patrol, and they all got annihilated instantly. Yeah. So I don't know what his view on it, but basically really good. It's very sort of sociable. The game, even for a 4-player game, we were going quite slowly. It probably took an hour and a half or something like that, which isn't too bad. And I like it because you get to see a lot of quite amazing minis. So I think the miniatures for Warhammer Underworlds are some of the best that GW do.
Most characterful,
really good because they don't have to rank up, so they can take their time to sculpt them in interesting ways. And just very enjoyable, really good, sort of sociable gaming where it's not so taxing that you're having to not have conversations at the same time as playing. But there's still enough of a game there that you can, get into and
feel
sort of think
engaged,
about what you're doing tactics-wise as well.
Yeah,
so,
okay, maybe I'll give it a try. I've got 4 or 5 war bands. I got the Gnarlwood box, which was the Beastmen versus the Wood Elves. And then I've got a handful of other ones from when I was really into it. So I'll have to dig out the decks and see if I've still got all the cards that I need.
Cool. I like the system. A couple of things I will say is that they make these little iterative changes to the sort of core rules, seemingly with every box set. So like things which I thought I knew turned out not to be the case a couple of times, which is fine. But like, and most of the time you can see why they've done it and it kind of makes some sense. Sometimes maybe not so much, and it can sort of like really disadvantage certain war bands depending on whether they're, objective based or whether they're wanting to kill stuff or whatever it is. So that's fine. I mean, the game's been out for a while, and I understand that they want to like sort of tighten things up and like make these small changes. But what's definitely the case is like newer war bands are like way more powerful than older war bands. So I think if some sort of like house rule balancing is required to like maybe deck build a bit with some of the older ones, if you still want to use them.
And is it because of the decks, or is it because of the cards and the abilities of the people themselves?
Probably both, but mostly the decks, I think. Mm-hmm. A lot of the newer decks seem to have, you can get glory points, which is how you win games. Mm-hmm. You get points just for sort of being alive and doing things, as opposed to have to like really...
You have to take objective 2.
Exactly.
Which is in the opposite side of the board.
They seem to give you points for doing things that you want to do anyway, which is fine. You can all... this is something I want to do at some point, play the Rivals decks, which are like solid pre-built decks, which are meant to be balanced against each other. And yeah, it would be interesting to see how that goes.
Yeah, I definitely want to try that. But it's just, yeah, I'm up for giving it a go still. I've got the stuff there. I just find a time to do it. I've been pretty busy.
Yeah, man. But that's my gaming life for the last little while.
Yeah, you've done plenty of it, haven't you?
What have you been
doing? So what have I been doing? I have recently had a game of, so just Friday gone, played this game here, Masters of the Universe Battlegrounds, and it has a lot of similarities with Underworlds. So it's hex-based, but it's got a really unique activation system in that you get a hand of 5 cards at the start called Fate cards of each turn, and those cards have a number of action points and a number of mana on them, and then they have a bonus which might be like an additional action point, or it might be an additional mana, or it'll be attacks with ranged weapons cost 1 less action point to use this turn, things like that. And what it means is that you activate let's say Skeletor, you activate Skeletor on turn 1, and he gets to do 2 things, and he can use some mana that is generated to spend it. But the next time you activate him, his activation is going to be completely different, because you're not going to have that card anymore.
Okay.
And he's going to maybe do more or do less with more or less resources, and it really changes the way the game plays because of that. Included in that deck, so you get 20 cards each, is 2 sort of secondary objectives as well, which you could potentially score. And interestingly, once you score an objective in this game, like the actual physical objective, it's removed, so the other team can't then later take it. So there's a bit of a rush to get to them without dying or losing your secondary objectives at the same time. But yeah, cool nostalgia-based models for me. It's it's He-Man and Skeletor and all of the...
I was going to just take you back to the words when you activate Skeletor, which sounds pretty cool.
It does, yeah.
How was it having, just like...
Yeah, it was really cool. So we only played the... So thanks to Paul for the game, Paul from the club. But we played the demo sort of game at the start, where it's preset forces, preset map, really cool. We'll get onto that in a second, but really sort of simplified game mode, which definitely allowed everyone's abilities to shine a bit. But yeah, it was just cool. Like had his Skeletor and his staff and a magic blast was what he was equipped with, and I managed to zap Stratos with it, which was pretty cool, who is just like a guy with wings and a jetpack. So I managed to kill him with a couple of nasty blasts from that. And you can take multiple iterations of the same action in a turn, but each time you do it, it costs an extra action point. So to do something twice, you have to have 3 action points minimum, and then if you're going to do it again, you're going to have another 3, which is crazy. But yeah, and it's in the same way, it's not lethal, so even the most damaging attack in the game doesn't have the ability to kill someone in one go.
Okay.
So it's nice that there's a bit of you're not just getting picking, you're not just getting picking models up all the time. Yeah, it was cool. Like, and in the game itself, you pick your characters who come with equipment, but you can also, they have like a limitation of how many items they can take and what items they can take, so you can start messing about with different types of armor, different types of weapons, special abilities and things like that. So there's a bit of the building in that sense, and then there's a bit of deck building in the Fate decks as well. So yeah, just thoroughly enjoyed it. It was nice, fairly quick. You get lots of terrain in the box, which is pretty cool, and the expansions are really cheap. I think each of the small box expansions are only 14 quid, right, and you get 2 or 3 characters plus some terrain and some cards in it, so it's pretty good, isn't it?
Pretty good.
Yeah, so enjoyed that. and I got to go He-Man quite a lot as well, which I quite enjoyed. And we had a Flesh and Blood starter night where I sort of set up a Flesh and Blood league at the club, and we had, I think, 8 or 9 people playing that night, and then so
it was busy in that room.
it was really
so
busy.
Flesh and Blood.
It's
Collectible
card game, a trading card game. We've focused on a commoner format, so very cheap decks, £3-4 at most, which makes it accessible for everyone. The club furnished the people who joined with deck boxes and sleeves and pre-made decks who one of the members of the community came and helped with. They curated the decks so that they were all on sort of an equal power level, and it's been great because I've seen that even just since that night, a couple of people have been like around each other's houses and played some games, and then everyone that's chatting that was there on that night is saying, oh well, I'm playing a game of Age of Sigmar tonight, but I'll bring my deck with us, so after we're finished I might be able to get a game in, or I haven't got a game plan, but I'll bring my Flesh and Blood, so if anyone gets finished soon enough. So yeah, it's been really good to see that doing well.
How to build a community. There's something we should probably talk about as a subject at some point, because it's an interesting
be
thing.
Obsessive like me. That's
just
normally
tell everyone
pretty
it's
good.
Great and don't give up.
Just do it.
Cool.
And so it's not a game had, but a game coming. I've got so Dan, who is the gentleman that bought you your Secret Santa.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, and the gentleman that I played 40k with and reminded us that 40k is a terrible game. So the stipulation of me playing that game of 40k was that he would come and play a game of Conquest with me. So he's having his first game of Conquest on Friday coming. Looking forward to that greatly. But I'm also running now once a month, third Thursday of every month, at Bay Games, an official Bay Games Conquest demo night for people to come down and try the game. So that'll be good to get another local store involved in Conquest, and somewhere for people to come and learn things like that outside the club. It's good.
So I definitely want to play some more Conquest this year.
Definitely.
Especially after seeing some recent model, not releases, because they're not final sculpts, are they yet? But like some planned releases, particularly for the Spires faction in Conquest.
Absolutely.
Looking very cool.
Your Desolation drones and your Leonine Avatora,
looking really nice. I mean, that's fantastic. But has there been sort of like uptake of those sessions that you're doing at Bay Games already, or how's that working?
So the first one is this Thursday. I haven't done one yet. But he's got, I think he said 3 people that want to come and try the game, so that's great. And it'll be probably, just like it is with everything, it took me a long time to get Conquest started in the club, and it just takes repetition. It's just turn up with some models that look cool, put them on the table, and then ask somebody, do you want to push this one around? Do you want to roll the dice for this one? And then eventually there'll be, I'll take this turn, I'll take that turn, blah, blah, blah. And that's how you get them hooked.
Definitely. I'm sure with a lot of these things as well, I mean, so Bay Games is a gaming store.
Yep.
But like people, you don't know what background, you don't know what games people have played before.
Precisely.
Whether they've done sort of rank and flank type games which sort of translate neatly into this, or whether it's going to be something brand new for them.
Yeah.
All of that is, from a teaching point of view or whatever, is fine and good, because you can still find ways to sort of
absolutely
sell the game, and it sells itself to a large extent. I think a big advantage is not having to deploy a whole army at the start of the game.
Yeah.
Because you're playing the game very quickly. There isn't this whole sort of like hour-long setup phase.
Yeah.
You're playing the game quite quickly and doing things quickly without having to worry about what everything does.
And the game kind of unfolds, doesn't it? You never feel like you've lost that deployment because you made a bit of a mistake where these couple of units have gone and then they're going to get shot off the board turn 1, because you get multiple turns to react to each other's deployment as more stuff comes on, so it's really cool.
That's brilliant. So good luck with that.
Thank you.
And if anybody wants to learn Conquest, then get in touch with yourself or with Bay Games, the store.
Indeed.
Bay Games, fantastic game shop, as we've mentioned, in Whitley Bay in the northeast of England.
That's it for me.
Recent games, all done.
Not done too much in terms of gaming recently.
All right. Okay. So let's keep this fairly brief, but let's check in with GW. This is the bit where we say either ach ja or nicht to our friends and overlords at Games Workshop, just to make sure that we're definitely talking about them at least once every episode for the algorithm or whatever. So yeah, I'll go first. I want to give them both a thumbs up and a thumbs down for the release of The Old World. Very briefly, thumbs up just for bringing it back, really.
Yeah.
I've been reading a little bit of Gotrek and Felix recently. Yes. I've nearly finished the whole thing. God, it's taken a while. It's taken years, but they sort of like get quite good again at the end. Anyway, that's another subject. As a setting, it's fantastic. Warhammer Fantasy, phenomenal. It's amazing. Yeah. It's kind of the OG fantasy gaming setting. So I'm glad it's back. I'm really glad that people are getting to be excited about having their game back, leaving off to the side the fact that people are getting excited about something which was taken away from them or blown up or whatever. And
new folk, by the way. So there's opportunity for folk who didn't have the opportunity before. So let's not begrudge them the chance to get excited about The Old World.
100%. I'm really delighted for anyone that's like looking at the models and looking at the system and thinking that this is cool. So that's great. And yeah, I mean, it's a setting that sort of got me back into this. As I've said before, they literally killed it off the second that I started showing an interest in it, but I didn't take it too personally. But so yeah, delighted that they're bringing it back. But thumbs down. I kind of don't understand how they're doing it. So like, if it is, as I'm kind of assuming, aimed mostly at people who have got a nostalgia for it and already played it, or already played some version of fantasy in the past, and by all means disagree, whatever, at any point, then those people have already got probably 3 or 4 or 5 armies sort of ready to go. And how much money are you going to make selling them models? I don't know.
Bases.
Or rule books, because you got to buy 4 rule books to sort of get going. If it's aimed at people who are new, and my God, you need to learn how to, build and paint plastic miniatures, resin miniatures, and metal miniatures. It's wild to me that like they're sort of like they're bringing some of the stuff that's coming back. I think some of the stuff that previously was fine cast is being done in metal now, which a lot of people will see as like a big thumbs up. People will be much a lot of people rather have metal than fine cast.
Absolutely.
But from the point of view of somebody who might be like new-ish to wargaming, and
whose experience is building the Indomitus box.
And all of a sudden they're going to be getting the super glue out and like trying to get this metal thing to sort of stick together.
That's still got loads of mold release on it, and no matter what they do, it's just not getting stuck together.
So like I kind of I kind of don't get it. Like, is it just coming back to get some money from people who are nostalgic from it? And if that's the case, haven't those people all got armies already?
Yeah, it feels really half done, doesn't it? It does feel really half done. It's.
Do you think they start off with an idea? I mean, obviously it's a business, and people make different decisions, and compromises have to be made, and that's totally normal. But do they start off with an idea, and then like I'd be really interested to know how close what is happening now is to what they sort of thought they were going to do 4 years ago. Maybe it's exactly what they thought they were going to do. It feels maybe not.
I don't know. I think I disagree. Actually, I think it is very intentional. I just don't think they've really thought it through in terms of. So I'm almost certain that there's either a degree of trying to get through some back stock.
They've said not. Yeah. They've said everything that's coming in these boxes is new cast.
Why? Why? So this is my bad GW. This is my bad.
I don't think they've had skeletons hanging around for 20 years in the warehouse somewhere. This is the newly printed insanity. Old things.
So it's insanity that they're still using these molds of 20-year-old models. 20-year-old models and then mixing them. So this is my big thumbs down for GW for this section is the mix and matching of scale in one box. The Tomb King's box has got skeletons with heads the size of Ogryns from this old, more cartoony, almost like Harryhausen style of skeleton.
And then I like those skeletons.
And absolutely fine if everything looked like that, but then you put the new Tomb King next to them, and he's a true hero scale 32mm or 30mm model, which is much more like their modern sculpting style, and it just doesn't fit. It just doesn't fit, and it's insane, man. And I don't think that they should be forcing people to do metal miniatures. I don't think that, and I think they're going to struggle. I love metal miniatures, by the way. I've got loads and loads of Infinity down there, and
if you know what you're getting into, I mean,
yeah, so you should not bring a line of product out to fill a small niche in a market of some folk that used to play a game that's from a while ago, and just cover that base. They're putting a lot of time and effort into advertising and doing, they've got all of the media hype going, and they're chatting up the big one about what it's going to be, and they've just half done it. It's not like it feels insane to even consider white metal miniatures and resin miniatures for these, when they have the ability to make insanely detailed plastic miniatures now. Some of the plastic miniatures that come out of GW these days, you look at stuff from like Cursed City and things, like they're way more detailed than the resin miniatures that are coming out for the Tomb Kings or the Bretonians. They don't need to use, because the whole argument is resin is better for detail, right? Just like metal.
Well, depending on who's making the resin and when it's been made, but yeah, so generally speaking, I think
generally the higher detail models.
The most detailed miniatures that I've got are plastic.
Plastic, yeah.
But I think so. There is a thing, isn't it, of like not the molds. Use the right word, but whatever the metal things are, which the plastic is injection molded into, cost a huge amount of money to make from new. So presumably, if they've already got the metal molds kicking around, that's why they're just cranking out new ones. But it is wild.
So me as a, and I'm going to link it to another game here. So Conquest. So we're talking about Conquest. So in Conquest, Old Dominion, it's undead faction, skeletal Romans, opposable arms, all that kind of stuff. And they've got some of that old ball and socket joint style limbs, like the skeletons do, and a lot of the models actually in the game do. And I've had many conversations with folk in my community about how difficult models are to build, and these folk are all people whose experience prior to this have been new GW, either easy to build or modern kits, which are essentially 2 or 3 bits that just go together.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't feel accessible. It doesn't feel accessible, and they should be making, if they want to do right to the old world and make it a thing that's available to everyone, because they've gone as far as saying that they're going to essentially change the scope of the setting and say it's only covering this particular period of time with these particular factions, which is why the other ones aren't getting proper releases. And
a couple of 100 years prior to the
exactly
where we were before, aren't we? Yeah.
Exactly. So like, you've decided that you actually, you've got an involved setting, and it's not just here's some rules and some models to play the game that you like. It's like, it's a setting that's getting developed. So like, just do it properly. Like, even if it meant that you had to trickle out the factions, that's fine. But some of the old sculpts stand up. Stuff like the Shabdi look phenomenal still, I think, personally. I agree. Look amazing.
You've seen the price of them. I can't, like, it's like 55 quid or something for the 3 of them.
Is this with the new ones?
Yeah.
Well, the boxed old world box ones, yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
But anyway, yeah. It's an anachronism, isn't it? They're bringing back something which had so much weight to it. Yeah. That, like, there's obviously no way you can do that without loads of people pissing and whining, like we are now.
I wouldn't even know what it is if they just went right. We're just starting releasing or like stocking things again, but we're not making it the old world. It's not this new entity, it's not loads of whatever. It's just a new edition without these changes that we're making to make it this new thing. Because they're like the old world. It's not fantasy anymore. It's the old world. It's different. Like if they had just went right, it's just fantasy. We'll put fantasy stuff back on the shelves, and there's a slightly updated version of the rules, like we do with 40k every year and a half or whatever. I would have been like, right, fine, yeah, you just, it's just the same game. But because they're trying to create all this buzz about how it's this new old thing, it just really annoys us.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, sort of
New teams. The thumbs up is the new sculpts are cool, but just in isolation.
I'm looking forward to. I'll say Achia to reading some new Black Library stuff set in that setting, especially because it is a part of a setting which wasn't, I think like the Empire. There's no sort of overall emperor. There's various people are like competing. That sounds a bit like whatever when it was like the period of Rome when you had like 4 emperors or something like that going on. So yeah, that sounds kind of cool, but yeah, niched for some of the way that they've been releasing it.
Yeah.
But all right, let's move on.
Yes.
Let's move on from GW to something a bit more serious.
Yeah.
Our main topic is playing games about real wars or real world stuff. So yeah, very big, I think interesting and potentially quite divisive topic, which we've wanted to try and deal with for a little while. Or to like flesh out a conversation that we'd previously had.
Yeah.
I think like just to like you've said in here, like add a disclaimer warning. Obviously, I mean we've got no intention of like upsetting anyone.
No.
But obviously, it's a conversation about like real world conflicts that have happened.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even in our friendship group, we had a discussion when one of the topics came up originally, didn't we? And our friend Josh was. It surprised us actually. He was quite sort of adamant that he would never play a game based on World War II, and he has very strong feelings about it. And even somebody that I had loads of conversations about loads of different games and plays 40k and he plays this and plays that, and loads of really sort of like mass battle games and things like that, didn't expect that to come from him. So it just shows that there are topics that people might have personal links to, family or personal experience in the military, or just really strong feelings about. So if it is something that you're worried about, we'll leave some timestamps on the YouTube video, or just in the show notes. If you have a little look, we'll tell you what time to skip to. If you just want to cut this segment out, I think is the fair thing to do, just so people don't have to engage in it. But what we can say is that we're going to approach it like adults, and we just want to have a sensible and open discussion about some of the topics that are surrounding real conflict and wargaming.
Absolutely. So I think we want to take a look at some of the topics that people may find uncomfortable or upsetting, and try and understand like what it is. I mean, we can only talk for ourselves, but like where sort of we stand on that. Like basically, to put it really simply, like what kind of games or settings do I feel okay about playing? Yeah. What do I not? And like what's driving those things? Yeah. I think that's the easiest way of sort of summing it up. But should we start off by talking about like what real world tabletop war games we have actually played?
Yeah.
Or want to play and why we're interested in them?
Yeah.
I might go first because I think mine will be briefer. So I've played Blood Red Skies, which is the version that I was playing in any case was World War II themed. It was a Battle for Britain.
It was a Battle for Britain box. Yeah.
So it was a World War II themed aerial dogfights type game with some like really cool mechanics about how like
advantage
which planes are able to shoot at which basically. I own Hail Caesar, which I've like wanted to play for ages, and then just sort of like it went on the pile of no current plans.
Yeah.
So that's basically is it rank and flank? It's probably not a million miles away from like Warmaster in terms of like some of the mechanics and stuff.
It's Rick Priestley.
It's a Rick Priestley game. So yeah, the same guy that designed it. So yeah, that's obviously, well, the box that I bought was Roman invasion of Britain. So it's I was doing them as late Imperial Romans. Just interested in in that sort of period of history. And a game that I definitely want to play at some point soon is Bolt Action. Partly because of a sort of interest in the Second World War, and partly because of some of the mechanics of the game. So there's a thing where activations happen by drawing dice out of a bag.
Correct.
And so you know how many activations you've got left roughly compared to the other person, and that sort of dictates what you want to do in it. So yeah, but that's it for me. How about yourself?
So also played Blood Red Skies with Drew at the club. Also the Battle of Britain box. Played quite a lot of Bolt Action and the Tank Wars version of it, which is just the armored combat version only. Hovered around quite a lot of Hail Caesar and Napoleonic stuff in my old club down in North Shields because there's quite a big historical group in there, and they play quite a lot of stuff about like Argentinian War and Vietnam and some more modern conflicts there, as well as some back to things like British and Zulu wars and things like that. So there's quite a lot of historical stuff goes on there. I'm really interested in playing Chain of Command, which is a World War II based game as well. And there was a system that was released a little while ago called Spectre Ops, which had initially caught my eye, and it was sort of a special forces small team skirmish game against the quote unquote bad guys. So it could be a special forces team from somewhere else, and you're both trying to retrieve the same amount of information, or some sort of cartel or whatever. But yeah, some more modern stuff. But there's some stuff that we'll get into a little bit later about that. That's a bit strange and a little bit sort of maybe doesn't sit as well as but I think one of the big things that sparked the discussion initially with us was this video, wasn't it? This Midwinter miniatures video. What was it called?
It was called The Big Problem with Historical War Games. So so Midwinter Minis, for anybody that doesn't know, is probably one of the biggest sort of wargaming channels, mostly Warhammer Games Workshop focused channel, but does other stuff as well. Really good for like beginners, how to paint things type videos. And really sort of like accessible content. But they did, that's Guy and Hattie at Midwinter Minis, they did a video about Bolt Action. And they were kind of like thinking out loud, I guess, about why it is that, there isn't more of an audience for historical war games. And there's a bit that I'll just read out, because it kind of like gets to like what the sort of like backlash against their video was.
Absolutely.
So they said, quote, "Now, not wanting to paint everyone with the same brush, but what reasons might a person have for actively collecting an Axis army? Maybe they're just a power gamer. The Germans had some really good equipment, tanks and trucks. Maybe they just want to win the games that they play. Maybe they're a historian who studied the German perspective of the war or wants to understand the psychological rationale behind regimes against like Nazism. Maybe they're just big Hugo Boss style aficionados, but maybe, just maybe, they might be slightly too into it." And I think that's probably the bit which caused all the sort of, or a lot of the pushback. So then there was a lot of other channels which are much more focused on historical war games, who were sort of saying, "So you're saying that we're all Nazis then?"
Which was my instant reaction. I mean, you can see a line of Bolt Action German tanks there, and it initially instantly felt like that would include me, because I have a German army in Bolt Action. And it's a really disquieting thing to hear, that somebody might think that about you just because of a game that you've chosen to play. But yeah, so So there's quite a lot to unpick from it, isn't there?
Yeah. So with historical or real world war games, then what are the things that you think might make somebody want to play them or not want to play them? I said before we started recording, I've got like a very sort of like ham-fisted kind of like way of approaching this. So for example, I know definitely that I do not want to play a war game of like horrendous stuff that's in the news that's happening now. So I don't want to play Hamas versus IDF. I don't want to play anything about what's going on in
Ukraine.
Yeah, absolutely not. But I do feel that I'm like kind of probably okay with playing Second World War stuff. So my question to myself is like, where's the line between those two? Something that I know I'm definitely not okay with, and something that I think that I probably am okay with. And yeah, so what are the dimensions that make something okay for me or for you or for anyone else, because everyone's got their own subjective take on it. I think so. Like an obvious thing to say is time, the amount of time that's passed.
Absolutely, yeah. So yeah, exactly. So it fit things like the conflicts that are happening that we've just discussed currently feel too real, don't they? Because it's happening every day, and you're reading things about the atrocities that are happening, and it might feel almost a bit contributory to play a game where you're actively involving those two, groups of people.
And yet, it's, people that are still alive were involved in the Second World War.
Yeah.
And it sort of feels a bit weird to say, oh, well, it's just because it was, if it's older, then it's fine.
Yeah.
So like, oh, the Roman stuff, obviously that's fine because that was ages ago.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. There's something.
Yeah. So World War II's fine, but what about Korea?
Yeah.
What about Vietnam? What about Argentina? What about, we're starting to get into even invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan, which are now, knocking on 10, 15, 20 years. Like how far past that do we need to be to for our sort of moral compass to take that as it's okay now?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think for me, and again, only speaking personally, but like I think with World War II stuff, I mean, firstly, bolt action seems like kind of a cool game. So there's that. But from the sort of like moral or ethical point of view, I think like, so I'm interested. I'm interested in like that period of history, as I am in a bluffer's way with any period of history.
Yeah.
But I've got an understanding that like my knowledge about like a lot of things that happened is terrible. So I'd be looking at the like taking time to sort of like paint up guys that are in a certain uniform or that like we're in certain conflicts or whatever. I would be looking to like use that as a way to better understand history.
Yeah, and that was a bit of the intonation of the video as well, wasn't it? Because there was a bit of a you've got these guys who go out of their way to read about the whichever division, say like whichever SS division they're basing their army on.
Yeah.
So then they're reading about this SS Panzer division, and they had this many platoons of riflemen, they had this many tanks available or whatever. So I'll build my list with those restrictions in mind because that's that's the division that I'm basing on. But then, like, is that I think the impression that I got from the video was that they were talking about that as if it was appreciation of those people or that thing that happened instead of learning or understanding or whatever. Like, why would you choose to pick the SS Panzer division? Yeah. Why would you choose a group of people who were responsible for atrocities, innumerable atrocities across that period of time in the war?
I think that gets us sort of into an interesting thing of like, what makes you want to go any faction in any kind of war game, and like, are you cosplaying as them? And I mean, I definitely don't want to be an ultramarine in 40k necessarily, or whoever. I think it's probably something that's quite hard to put your finger on. It's just there's something that interests you about them. There's some sort of tension about what they want to do or whatever it is. Something to do with a story. I mean, it can be all sorts of things.
So I think for me, personally, I think I have a my German army is based on an SS Panzer division, and it's exclusively for a few reasons. One of which is the vehicles that are available, because I'm really interested in military history, but particularly vehicular military history, tanks and planes, especially planes, and the machines that were part of the German army at the time were just marvels of modern engineering at the time, and really, really interesting. But also, I really liked I wanted to try painting the camo patterns that were available, so the ambush camo from the SS Panzer division, and I really wanted to try my hand at painting that, and that was the thing that made me decide that's the faction that I'm going to choose.
But those kind of things about like, oh well, I want to play bolt action because of a cool activation thing where you draw dice out the bag, or you wanted to like paint some miniatures. It can sort of seem a bit flippant when if you think a lot about like what's what it is that you're sort of representing. But yeah, I don't know. It's a different way of approaching history. It's quite an involved way of approaching history, or it could be like
And I would argue actually that. It gives people the opportunity to do the reading or listening or watching of things and gain more of an understanding than maybe the people who would have opinions about people who are doing it. And they might have their, well, I had to do history in GCSE, so I know that this person existed and the wars happened from this year to this year, but really don't know the depth or the nitty-gritty of some of the conflicts that were part of.
Yeah, I mean, if you define
I'm trying
history
to be very I don't want to be too specific about anything, you know what I mean? But without I think a lot of people maybe have opinions about what people do as a hobby, or especially when it comes to something that has maybe a bit of moral ambiguity.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, going back to the Midwinter Minis video, I think there was a couple of other things which probably sort of like wound people up about it. One of which was that I think it was sponsored by World of Warships.
Yeah.
Which actually had featured German... I mean, somebody said in the comments, and I haven't checked this out, I don't know if it's possible for this to be true.
Yeah.
So, but whatever, I'll say it anyway. So somebody said in the comments that like, so World of Warships features German ships, one of which blew up a boat that like my grandfather was on or something.
Yeah.
So like, it kind of looks a bit shan if you're like taking sponsorship money from something which is based on real world stuff, whilst also at the same time.
And the video almost sort of went from this like, oh, you got to look out for these guys, because you can spot them from a mile away in the shop, wearing these clothes, blah, blah, and that takes us to my sponsored segment, which is blah, blah, World of Warships. I've been really enjoying playing it, and blah, blah, blah. And you just thought, like, God, that's so on the nose that I almost felt
a bit satirical.
Yeah, but...
Anyway, well, let's leave Midwinter Minis to the side for
one. Yeah.
Because, there's only so much to say about that. Something I was interested in that you mentioned just a second ago was like playing military games in these sort of like different theatres, which maybe aren't the sort of like standard or canonical ones. And so with that bit more experience, and like, have you ever come across anyone who was, quote, too into it? Or like, have you ever come across anyone in any sort of like military, real world war game who, you were like, what's the story with this guy? Why is he painting things this way?
No, I haven't actually. I never have. But maybe it's my... I've never seen that guy. I've never seen that guy who is, like stands at the other side of the table and talks about how great the Nazi regime was, and all this kind of thing. I've got friends who've painted models, and they've painted the certain models that get released that have the swastika on the flag that's folded up on the front of the tank,
right?
So that he's painted the part of the swastika that you could see, because it's sort of accurate to the sculpt and what was there at the time. But I also know that he's one of the most friendly most accepting and most sort of inclusive people that I know, and I can't imagine them aligning any of these thoughts and feelings with that of that horrendous fascist regime. So I think that's something that sort of gets people's backs up and things as well, doesn't it? And it's really interesting to see where the source of the unsettlement comes, isn't it? So is it the fact that this model exists and that person has painted that red, that white, and that black?
Yeah.
Or are they upset about the fact that that person might have or share feelings with what it means?
Yeah.
So
which is a thought and a conversation that you just don't have to have when you're playing AOS.
Exactly.
Or 40k.
Yeah.
Mostly.
But I mean, if you spend any time looking into the Imperium of Mana, it's an autocracy and all of the
it's also a sort of anti 1980s Thatcherite kind of what's the word I'm looking for? It's taking the mickey out of it's taking things to their logical conclusion, isn't it? It hasn't actually happened. I think so. Yeah, I assume that a large part of the disquiet that people have, where people would be fine playing 40k, not fine playing bolt action or whatever, is a sort of thing of wanting to play war games as for escapism, and to not have to think about the real world, and for it to be kind of like, I don't know, like a sort of a representation on a table of something that you might want to watch an anime about, or something that you might want to watch, like I don't know, a sci-fi film about. I mean, a lot of it, not getting too back into the depths of things, but wargaming has probably sort of like taken off for the history of it, I don't know, in the 70s and 80s and things, as sort of like Hollywood films have sort of like started to really portray, Schwarzenegger and Rambo and things like that. So there's, I assume that a large part of like war games are kind of like power fantasies of a sort, even if they're very sort of like ironic ones. Yeah. But then when you are playing something which like featured real people and where people have really died, then all of a sudden that sort of like exploded away, and you're sort of like left with, I don't know, like trying to think like, well, why would you want to recreate that? War is horrendous. War is, like there's it's the grimmest thing you can imagine. Of course. Why would you want to like recreate that on the table?
Does the same sentiment go to film though?
Well, and computer games.
Exactly. I mean, if you look at something like Call of Duty or whatever, and
super realistic.
Yeah, and there's that whole the elevator lobby scene, which was insane in Call of Duty, and that represents really nitty gritty day-to-day life. That's current conflict style stuff, isn't it? And it's difficult. Like
you don't have to paint Call of Duty.
No,
it's quite a quick thing to spend 60 quid and just install it, and then you're up and running.
Yeah, and I think one of the things as well is that you're always playing the good guy, aren't you? Or very, very frequently you're playing the good guy. You're always aligned with who the allies.
Yeah.
In the World War II setting ones, I can't think of any World War II game that I've ever played that's like, right, you jump in the seat of a tiger and go and hunt down some Americans. It's all, you're always playing allies versus Axis, aren't you? So yeah, maybe there is a bit of, and films as well are always told from the story, from the story's always told from the side of the good guy.
Yeah. Which is another thing. I sometimes, I mean, I've heard people talk about this. I think there was a Goonhammer article all about military and historical wargaming, which is quite interesting, where people were talking about playing war games as a way of potentially changing the narrative, so that we don't have to think of the good guys as who the good guys are the people that we currently think of, or like the ability to sort of like retell certain sort of conflicts or campaigns, which seemed to me like kind of an interesting thing. I mean, I don't know enough about probably, well, certainly don't know enough about any period of history to sort of feel that I would be able to sort of like manipulate it in that way. Getting back to something you were saying about, you know, have you ever met that guy? I've never met that guy and, you know, I've not been playing huge amounts of war games for that long, but I've never met that guy in any sort of interaction I've ever had. I just haven't. I've met that guy in non-wargaming situations plenty, like in the pub or whatever on Friday, but not like playing war games. Which, and obviously you don't have in-depth conversations about somebody's sort of like political or sort of philosophical underpinnings before you start rolling dice with them.
No.
But yeah, I've never had that interaction either, and I wonder sometimes whether, you know, it only takes that to happen once in one tournament in one place or whatever, and then it goes round the whole of the internet, and then Games Workshop have to do the Warhammers for everybody statement, which I think, if I remember rightly, I think maybe came after there was some guy in a Spanish 40k tournament who had painted swastikas on his kit or had done something. I think he called himself the Austrian painter or something. These things are either one followed the other, or they both happened around the same sort of period of time. So I've never, I don't know, I'm only talking from my own experience, but everyone I've ever played any sort of tabletop wargaming with has been massively sound.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's a product of the environment, I think, as well, isn't it? We play in a really good club that the admin teams work really hard to make sure is a good environment. But I've also played, so I've played in this club down in North Shields, which is on average a much older crowd, and I think a lot of the people that have been sort of you know, the mud's been thrown at have been from that, either from that older crowd or from sort of, or the opposite, like the really younger folk that are getting into it and just being really uneducated about the world and maybe having these slightly, well, not slightly, like really sort of over-exaggerated and unwelcome views about things. You know, this guy who you're talking about, the Austrian painter or whatever, and guarantee you, a lot of the people that think they're being edgy and cool and, you know, might think that saying some of these sort of out there things to get a bit of attention as an actual adult would be shuddering, thinking, God, I can't believe I've said things like that before. But I have never, even in this sort of typical older folk, and I say older folk, they're not old, but, you know, older folk, you know, average age is probably mid-50s, and playing these modern conflicts, or, you know, memorable history conflicts. I've never ever heard anyone say anything out of pocket. I've never ever heard anyone say anything where I thought, God, I wish you'd not said that. That's really, you know, that's made us feel uncomfortable or anything like that. And it's all been, I mean, 9 times out of 10, it's just like, oh, what's this rule again, and how does this work? It's never like, oh, yeah, this I can't wait till this person's killed that person because of this ill feeling that I've got towards them or anything like that. I can't wait to exact vengeance on this for this reason happen. But
is it, in your experience, is there a different sort of tenor to the kind of like I don't know, is there a different sort of feel when playing games? So, for example, if we're playing 40k and all of my Imperial Guard annihilates all of your whatever custodies, and I'm super happy about it, and I'll let you know. Is that like, is that
is that where you say hard lines?
Yeah. But like, that would, would you not do that possibly more when you're playing around some conflict where those people that you were simulating the death of have actually died, or is it, I don't know. Do you know what I mean? Does that make any sense?
Yeah. So you haven't got people shouting war from the other end of the table.
Yeah. Nobody's shouting war when you're playing.
Yeah. It definitely feels like a little bit more of a reserved experience, but that could also be because the average age is 55, and a lot of it's just blokes that are, you know, it's their friendship group that are, you know, meeting up on a Sunday afternoon in a church hall and sharing a packet of donuts and having a cup of tea, and, you know, like, the games go on for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, and there's lots of just chat at the same time about sharing about like the hobby, which is kind of what we do, isn't it? You know, a lot of our time at the table is also, oh, you know, I've been doing this as well, and what do you think of this, and do you like how I've done the pin and things?
Well, it's like a lot of hobbies where like, is it about the hobby? And to a large extent it is.
Yeah.
But is it about just like going out and socializing and meeting people and like, you know, being good for your mental health and all of that kind of thing? Yeah.
The club's called Contemptible Little Wargamers, by the way, and they're in North Shields. And they do play a bit of everything, but they've got a fantastic group of folk there. So if you are in North Shields, give them a wave because it's a really good club.
Okay, that's cool. Out of interest, do you or does anyone in your family have any sort of like military background at all?
Yeah, quite a lot.
Right.
My granddad was a desert rat. He was captured and force marched across many miles and put in a prisoner of war camp. I had pretty horrendous PTSD after that. But, you know, decorated soldier from, he was Royal Engineer. So yeah, there's, you know, there's military history in my family.
Does that affect how you think about any games, or would you want to sort of avoid anything which actual relatives had been involved in, or does it not?
So the
come
opposite,
into it?
actually. So the opposite. So what I had said was, if we ever did a game where we played in the theatre that he fought in, that I would really want to make his unit.
Right. Yeah.
I would like to include his unit in the army that I made. But equally, I would understand that if I was playing against someone that was using a British, you know, mechanized force, and I was playing as somebody else, Italians, Germans, whoever, I wouldn't be, you know, imagining the face of my granddad on a little plastic man.
No.
Yeah. But I can separate the two things. You know, I can have appreciation for the history, but also understand that I'm rolling dice and moving some models around a table. I think some people might think that's a bit like frivolous, you know, saying, "Oh well, you know, they are."
How can you separate it?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's interesting. So, I mean, part of the reason for asking about like, you know, actual military stuff is that when I was sort of researching this a little bit, I like stumbled across a YouTube channel called Little Wars, and a couple of videos that I saw were American guys who had been in the military and were either involved directly in or were involved around Fallujah, and they were recreating some of the operations that they'd been in.
Right.
And they had a conversation at the start of it about like, how do you feel about playing against, you know, like people who weren't involved in this, or like, is there some sort of like gatekeeper thing where like, you know, only if you've had the actual experience should you be allowed to on stuff? That they were saying from their point of view, or a couple of them were saying that they found it interesting seeing, you know, tactically the decisions that somebody would make if they had no military background. And I guess that gets into like, well, how realistic is the game? Does the game allow you to sort of express what's actually, you know, actual real world tactics? And again, I get that it gets into another question of, I don't know if I want a game to express it that much. I don't want it to be like a real simulation. I want it to be a game. And I think that comes down to, again, that thing of like, you know, if I'm pulling dice out of a bag, I'm not thinking necessarily about like the horrendousness of it. Whereas if there's some sort of like something going on, and we can talk a little bit about is it Spectre?
Spectre Ops. Yeah.
So Spectre Ops is, it's not the missions aren't set anywhere really in particular, but it's sort of like North Africa, or
North Africa,
you can kind of tell.
Yeah.
And we were having a discussion about like, are there any war games where like civilians are like actually represented? And I kind of couldn't think of any. And then I came across Spectre Ops, and there are there. And I think like a lot of part of the sell is that it's quite realistic. It's quite a bit of a simulation. I haven't looked into it in anything like enough detail to really know like how it plays as a game. And I don't think that's for me. So maybe that's, you know, if we're talking about like where the line is. I don't think like modern sort of suburban warfare or like special forces stuff where like there's a rule where if you shoot a gun into the air then the civilians all flee is for me. But I've got nothing against it being fine for somebody else. But yeah, this whole thing of like just the real world and games kind of colliding, and like sometimes the fourth wall maybe just sort of like disappears, and you're like, God,
Yeah.
this is real.
It's too real, yeah.
It's a really interesting kind of tension. I don't know what like the answer to it is, but I think that maybe that's not for me.
Yeah, it's interesting. Me and Scott got some models for it, just some STLs, and it's obviously a long time before the Russian-Ukraine conflict started. But I was going through some boxes the other day, and I uncovered the models I had got, and I had bought some Spetsnaz, like sort of near distant future, sort of Russian special forces Spetsnaz style folk. Again, because it's just the equipment that they get to use. I think I like the AK platform as a weapon. I think it looks cool, and I think it's got a long lineage, being used in many different formats in many different places, and that was literally and I think some of their body armor and the helmet shape and all that it's purely aesthetic, and it sounds pathetic, but it is purely aesthetic. So that's why I had bought them, but it did leave a bit of a sour taste in my mouth, and I thought I probably wouldn't use these.
Well, did it feel weird now that you'd sort of been overtaken by the real world kind of thing?
And it was. I mean, Russia have always been a shady country, and things have always. They've always had reasons to not like them in terms of how they perform politics and things like that, but not so much that I wouldn't potentially use them. And I've got a Russian army in bolt action as well.
Mm-hmm.
But even now, I'm like, God, it was a different world then to what it is now, and the Russian army then is not the Russian army now that's invading Ukraine and things like that. But even then, it kind of makes us feel a bit, So, long story short, I probably wouldn't use them. I got some Dutch folk as well, so I'll use them instead.
Interesting. Yeah. There's also I was thinking, is there also something have you ever thought about that isn't just about historical war games, but any war games any war games that we're playing a game where effectively we're trying to like kill each other's guys, and like what's all that about? Have you sort of like taken any time to sort of psychoanalyze that? I mean, that can go for computer games or whatever as well, but like I don't know, I sort of like I think we're the only species that sort of like fantasizes about its own demise or something. But like, it's kind of weird.
It is.
But is it just like a sociable way of imagining, the worst things in the world that could happen? And,
maybe,
or like the sort of cathartic thing about that?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I think it's just fantasy, isn't it? I think it's anything that's taboo, because, just like with all media and everything, it's just something that you wouldn't do in real life, or typically you wouldn't do in real life, isn't it? None of us are going to go around and just, like, pull out a sword and chop someone's head off, or
I'm not.
Yeah, or I mean, even like bar people who maybe do combat sports as a hobby, none of us are going to go around and, I mean, certainly none of my friends are going to be going around looking for a fight and having a dust up outside a pub. It's just not something that people really do anymore, or not on large scale anyways.
But I don't feel like I have to play war games, to get it out my system or anything like that.
Well, I think I just enjoy games.
Yeah.
I just enjoy games in general. So I play lots of board games that have absolutely nothing to do with conflict. You play board games about building the best flower bed or whatever.
Yeah.
And I get just as much satisfaction from the competition in that as I do in. But I mean, chess from day dot has been a game about killing each other's pawns and killing each other's queens, and
again, you don't have to paint regalia on your chess piece. I mean, some people do.
Some people do, yeah. But I think it's been there since, a long time anyways, hasn't it? So I can't explain the reason why I like it. But if I'm honest with you, though, and this might make us look a little bit like the Rain Man, but when I'm playing games, I'm never sort of imagining these Space
What's
Marines
actually happening?
Yeah, these Space Marines bolters are doing this and bap, and then this is what I'm rolling. Oh, that's how many of them have hit.
Just maths and tokens.
To me, honestly, it sounds ridiculous, but I'm like Neo in the Matrix. All I can see is numbers. That's all it is. So I know that when I roll this many dice, if I've got a 66% chance of hitting, this is how many on average I'm going to hit, and then I know what their save is. So I know on average how many of those hits they're going to save and how successful that action's going to be. And that, to me, is every war game, regardless of setting and things like that.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of it is just because the hobby side of it is just because models look cool.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So I guess the question is, why do those models look cool?
Well, most of the models that I've got are sort of fantasy or sci-fi. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean
No, it's interesting. It's interesting. So, like, every game effectively is just a reskinning of something else.
Yeah.
It's just,
but I mean, even if you look at something like, say, I don't know, like a beast. Just because I've been talking about it today, like a Beastman model. There's a Beastman model which is a Beast Lord holding an axe, and then he's got like he's got 2 axes, and then he's got like a couple of severed heads attached to his belt. This is a half man, half goat with big horns and 2 big axes, but with human severed heads attached to his belt. There's a degree of horrificness in that, isn't there? There's like that's dismembered parts of a person dangling from the belt of this person who's killed them.
correct.
But
I'll get back to my thing of like, I sort of think, so like one of my favourite authors was Ian Banks, also known as Ian M. Banks. He wrote a load of science fiction under that name. But like, he had a thing where he was asked once, because he had some really horrendous things happen and very graphically described in his novels. And this is not his science fiction stuff, it's very much real. This is our world, our world stuff. And he was asked why he did that. And I think his answer was something along the lines of, I just had this thing ever since I was a kid where if I imagine something really, really horrible happening, then I think it won't happen. It's sort of like a cathartic thing of sort of like, I'm experiencing this, or like thinking about this in some kind of like safe, kind of contained way in order that I hope not to experience it in the real world.
yeah,
And I don't think that's exactly it for me with like, games about horrible things.
Yeah.
But there's something about that. It's some sort of like way, in the same way as like a horror movie or a disaster movie. It's a way of kind of experiencing the thing, thinking about it in like a kind of in a way which is understood by other people. And whether you're in a cinema audience or you're playing Call of Duty Online, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Which doesn't actually end up in you having your head on the goat man's tassel or whatever. So I don't know. Maybe
it's just strange, isn't it? It is strange. Still, I think it's a topic that you could speak about forever, isn't it? And,
it is,
and everyone is looking at the same thing from a very, very different angle.
Yeah,
and there's personal experience and familial experience and even racial or generational experience that goes into all of these things, and it's something that you can't ever tell anyone what to think about.
I think that's right. Should we leave it there?
Yeah.
What have we learned? Anything to take out of this? I think anything radically different from having spoken it through.
No.
I still want to play bolt action.
Yeah.
But I
definitely don't play Spectre Ops. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No Spectre Ops for me. But I think it's just. Yeah, I think it's something kind of intangible. I don't know where that line is, and I don't exactly know why it is, but I know where it is for me.
But you feel it. You know that when you consider playing a game that is of a conflict that is of bad taste to you, then you know.
I'll know it when I see it. Okay, fine. Well, everything else after this is going to feel a bit like light and breezy, but like so it goes.
So if anybody did skip that segment,
hello again.
Yeah, welcome back to the normal broadcasting.
But all we need to do really is to wrap up. So we're going to do our secondary objectives, which is where we talk about something wargaming adjacent or something completely non-wargaming related, just to as a bit of a palate cleanser for the end. So do you want to go, Daryl? What have you got for us this month?
Well, actually, there's something that I didn't put on the show notes, but I just felt I should mention it because last night, myself and my fiancée Amanda went to our friend Edward and Catherine's house to celebrate Ed's birthday, and we did our first ever murder mystery. It was very interesting. Made more interesting with a bit of social lubricant in the shape of some beer.
Was it sort of relevant to the setting? Booze? Was it sort of like...
So they made great effort to do that. So yeah,
That's
so it
cool.
was set in the Wild West. So I had, I was rocking
bit of moonshine.
Well, they made they called it cactus juice, but it was tequila, like some sort of tequila cocktail, rum cocktail, something like that. But I took a bottle of bourbon along, and I drank lots of Corona. So yeah, that was pretty good, and it was really fun actually. And I was surprised at how well the night went. I did go in quite dubious, I'm not going to lie. I wasn't sure quite how far it would go and how well it would go. And it was quite involved because instead of it just being like, ooh, who did it? The guy who organised it, we had like character sheets with abilities and things on where we could use, 3 times for the whole night. You could get someone to reveal a secret to you because you're a good judge of character and things like that. So yeah, it was really interesting. And then it turned out that loads of people had loads of motives that you had no idea that they had in the first place. And yeah, it was really good. I played the judge, John Paulson. Yeah, it was good.
All right, that sounds great. So, what is this? Have you discovered a new side to yourself?
No. I wouldn't like. It's not going to be something that I actively pursue to do regularly. But It was really fun, and it was great to go and spend time with some people that were nice. Yeah, so it was good.
All right, fantastic. Yeah, that's very cool.
And I've got some active plans to introduce a non-wargaming friend, to an RPG. He's not really wargame curious, but he's bordering on RPG curious. So.
A great topic for the future is like how to get how to hook them in, how to get the muggles involved,
get the normies in, yeah.
All right, brilliant.
Okay. How about you?
Well, fresh off the press, this one because we were just there today. But do you like Lego?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, do you like Lego? Do you like books?
Yeah.
Then you should get yourself to The Word in South Shields. So we were there today.
All right. Okay.
Got the boat over from the Shields ferry, which is always fun.
Yeah.
And so The Word, for anyone that doesn't know, if you're in the Northeast, it's basically, well, it's a really fancy library, but I think it goes by the name of being the National Centre for the Written Word. So evidently, when it was come up with, they've had like a lot of funding to put this pretty phenomenal building in. You get off the ferry, you walk about 200 meters. Is it the glass
building that's on the right-hand side from when you get off the ferry?
It's just behind the BT thing, which is the glass building. It's just behind that.
I should know this because I'm from South Shields. Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, fantastic. I mean, the reason, go there anytime. It's pretty cool. It's an amazing library. They've got lots of stuff, non-library things, which I'll get to in a second. But at the moment, they've got an exhibition on called Brick Wonders, and I think it's all by a guy called Warren Elsmore. And basically, it's Wonders of the World. A fairly loose sort of like take on that. So, but Wonders of the World, all in Lego, all in little glass cabinets. So there's a Hanging Gardens of Babylon, and there's a London Bridge, and there's some sort of underwater scenes. There's an International Space Station.
Oh, amazing!
There's all sorts, and each one, for anyone who builds Lego, it'd be kind of interesting. Each one says how many bricks, how long it took them to make, and sort of like what. A few other things about like what kits or like what they'd used for it. So just really fantastic. I mean, anything to do with Lego is kind of like cool for kids. I was there with my 6-year-old and my 2-year-old. They had a fantastic time. In addition, the library's got like a SNES and an Atari simulator on like big screens. They've got this sort of like gaming bit. So that was pretty cool. I was in there for a bit trying to like play like some Atari pinball game. But yeah, it's fantastic. So it's on till April. It's free. You just walk in. You can join the library and like lend books and do all the normal library stuff. But yeah,
that sounds
Brick
great.
Wonders by Warren Elsmore at The Word is my secondary objective. Very
Excellent.
Cool.
Yeah. That does sound really good. Yeah.
So that's going to do it. So thank you, Daryl.
Thank you, Lee.
Very enjoyable. And thanks to the listeners out there. It's all for the listeners. If you've got any questions, or any feedback, we're at betrayedbydice@gmail.com. We'll try and stick to our one episode per month.
Yeah.
Don't think we've scheduled in what the next one's going to be about
Not
specifically.
yet. So maybe somebody could do a suggestion to betrayedbydice@gmail.com.
Perfect. What do you want us to talk about?
Yeah.
Email in. Failing that, we'll have some sort of fantastic idea between now and then.
Something incredibly stimulating.
Yep. But yeah, thanks so much for listening. Bye everyone. Bye for now.
Take care. Bye.